You ever get that feeling when something's not quite right, when your gut pulls you toward a secret buried deep beneath the surface? Well, I did. It started with a simple drawing, just a sketch from my daughter, but it wasn't just any drawing. It was the same house, over and over, day after day, page after page. At first, I thought it was just a kid's imagination. Maybe she'd seen a house somewhere on TV or in a book. But then, something happened that turned my world upside down. This wasn't just any house. It was the exact house from a cold case that shook our town years ago, a mystery nobody could ever solve. And my daughter didn't know a thing about it. I promise you, what I'm about to share with you is going to grip you in ways you never expected. Because what started as innocent drawings spiraled into a haunting journey, one that pulled me into the darkest corners of our past, into a story of loss, secrets, and a truth begging to be uncovered. You came here because you want answers, right? Because that kind of mystery doesn't just fade away. You're going to get the full story. Stay with me till the very end, and you'll understand why my daughter's drawings were more than just scribbles. They were clues, whispers from a shadow we never saw coming. Let me take you back to the beginning, the moment I first noticed the drawings. My daughter, Emily, is 6 years old, a bright and imaginative little girl who loves to draw. Like many kids her age, she fills her notebooks with colorful scenes, animals, and happy faces. But Emily's recent obsession wasn't animals or princesses, or anything cheerful. She kept drawing this one house. It wasn't fancy or pretty. It looked old, worn down, almost abandoned. Windows boarded up, a crooked porch, surrounded by overgrown weeds. There was something eerily familiar about it, but I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was just a figment of her vivid imagination. Kids often create stories and worlds that don't exist, right? So, I let it slide, even encouraged her to keep drawing. But after a week, the drawings became more detailed, more consistent, and that's when I started to feel uneasy. It was like she was trying to tell me something without words. As a parent, you want to protect your child from the world's darkness. But sometimes, darkness finds its way through cracks you didn't even know were there. One evening, after Emily had gone to bed, I sat down at my computer and, out of curiosity, typed in old abandoned house cold case for our town, hoping to see if any stories would pop up. That's when I stumbled on it, a decades-old mystery involving a house just like the one my daughter kept drawing. The police reports described the scene perfectly. A lonely house at the edge of town, boarded windows, peeling paint, surrounded by wild grass. It was the place where a young woman had disappeared without a trace over 20 years ago, never found, and the case had gone cold. For years, no leads, no suspects, just unanswered questions. And suddenly, my daughter's drawings weren't innocent anymore. They were a puzzle piece that didn't belong. Now, I want you to imagine being in my shoes right then, the disbelief, the confusion, the rising fear. How does a 6-year-old girl who had never even heard of this house, let alone the cold case, know what it looked like? I questioned everything. Had we driven past the house, once on the way to somewhere? Did she overhear a conversation? Or was there something else, something unexplainable, at work here? I know you've seen stories about psychic children or supernatural connections, but I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just telling you what happened. What followed next was a chain of events that pulled me deeper into a mystery I never wanted to confront, but couldn't ignore. I knew the answers were in those drawings, and I had to find out what Emily was trying to show me. It's hard to explain the kind of bond parents share with their children, but I think everyone watching this will understand the instinct to protect and listen, especially when your child's safety might be at risk. Emily's drawings began to consume her thoughts. She wouldn't talk much about the house, but sometimes, late at night, I'd catch her whispering to herself or staring out the window, as if waiting for someone. And there was one thing she said that froze me. The lady is still waiting. That was the first time she mentioned a person, and it sent chills down my spine. Who was the lady? Was Emily tapping into something beyond her years? Was she seeing something no adult could? I won't lie, at first I was scared. Scared that my daughter was haunted by something or someone. Scared that the cold case was still alive in ways I never imagined. and scared of what digging deeper might uncover. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more the mystery clawed its way into our lives. The house, the cold case, and Emily's drawings were all connected. The question was, how? And more importantly, why now? Why, after all these years, was this coming back to the surface? I know that if you've ever felt drawn to a mystery or unsettled by a family secret, you'll understand the desperate need to find answers before it's too late. So I decided to take action. I started researching every detail I could find about the cold case, the missing woman, the house, the neighbors, the police reports. I even reached out to the local sheriff's office, hoping to speak with someone who could shed light on the case. And guess what? The more I uncovered, the stranger things became. There were inconsistencies in the reports, witnesses who changed their stories, and a community that seemed reluctant to talk about the house or the woman who vanished. It felt like the past was hiding something no one wanted to face. And now, my daughter's drawings were the key that might unlock the truth. Here's where I want you, the viewer, to pause and really think about this. What if the answer to a decades-old cold case was hidden in the innocent drawings of a child? What if the clues were right in front of us all along, but nobody was brave enough to see them? This story is not just about a missing woman or a creepy old house. It's about how the past echoes through time and how sometimes the smallest voices can reveal the biggest secrets. And as I share this journey with you, I want you to watch closely, not just the drawings or the details, but the emotions, the connections, the silent whispers between a parent and child caught in a mystery far beyond their control. Over the next several minutes, you'll hear everything. How the drawings led me to uncover forgotten witnesses, strange encounters, and a shocking revelation that nobody saw coming. This isn't a tale with simple answers or easy solutions. It's a tangled web of memory, loss, and hope, and it's all real. What happened to that woman? Why did she disappear? And why did my daughter keep drawing her house like it was calling out to us? I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand why this story stayed buried for so long, and why it might finally come to light. But be warned, this journey isn't for the faint of heart. It will challenge what you believe, what you trust, and maybe even what you think you know about your own family. I'm not just telling you this story because it's strange or mysterious. I'm telling you because I believe that every mystery deserves to be solved, every voice deserves to be heard, and every family deserves to find peace. So, if you're ready, stay with me. Because what you're about to see will shake the very foundation of everything I thought I knew. And it all started with one drawing, the same house that no one dared to enter, a house that holds the answers to a cold case that's haunted us all these years. But here's the kicker. Just as I thought I was getting closer to the truth, something happened that changed everything. Something so unexpected, it made me question everything again. The last drawing Emily gave me had a new detail, something that wasn't there before. A shadowy figure standing in the window, watching. And that's when I knew the house wasn't just a place from the past. It was something alive, something waiting. What it wants, I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. And I want you with me every step of the way. Absolutely. Here's the next part, continuing from the introduction and diving deeper into the mystery. It builds tension, introduces more context, adds red herrings and potential suspects, and keeps the audience engaged with natural, flowing paragraphs. After seeing that shadowy figure in Emily's latest drawing, I couldn't just sit back and pretend this was a simple childhood fascination. My days became consumed with trying to piece together every detail I could about that cold case, about the woman who disappeared, and about the house that refused to stay buried in the past. I found myself walking a thin line between desperation and determination. The truth was slipping further away the more I tried to grasp it, like chasing smoke in the wind, but I couldn't stop. Not when my daughter's innocent art seemed to be begging me to uncover what was really going on. In the days that followed, I started digging through old news archives and police reports, hoping to find any overlooked clues or witnesses. That's when I noticed strange contradictions, stories that didn't add up, and details that were suspiciously vague. Some neighbors claimed they never saw or heard anything unusual around the time the woman vanished. Others whispered about arguments, threats, even a shadowy figure lurking near the house. But whenever anyone mentioned names or suspects, they quickly clammed up or changed the subject. The deeper I looked, the more I realized this cold case had been covered with layers of silence and fear. On top of that, I couldn't ignore the way people around me started acting differently. My wife, Sarah, seemed uneasy when I brought up the house or the case. At first, I thought she was just worried about how obsessed I was becoming, but sometimes her glances felt like she was hiding something. I asked her gently if she knew anything about the house or the woman, but she'd always brush it off with a nervous smile and say, "It's just a story from the past. Don't let it get to you." But you and I both know when someone's words don't match their eyes, something's being kept in the shadows. I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah might know more than she was letting on. And if she did, why wouldn't she tell me? At the same time, my closest friend and neighbor, Mike, started dropping hints that felt more like warnings than casual remarks. One afternoon, while helping me fix a broken fence, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Be careful with this stuff. Sometimes it's better to leave the past alone." His tone was serious, almost urgent, but when I pressed him for details, he shrugged it off and changed the subject. Mike and I have been friends since college. We've seen each other through everything, but lately, his unease was palpable. I started wondering if he knew something about the cold case or the house that he wasn't telling me. Or worse, if he was connected to it in some way. Even Emily's behavior added more confusion. Aside from her drawings, she began asking strange questions, like why people would disappear or where the lady went. One night, she woke up crying and said she heard footsteps outside our bedroom window, but when I checked, there was nothing there. I'm a skeptic by nature, but when a child starts having nightmares and sensing things you can't see, you have to start considering possibilities that don't fit into the neat box of logic. Was Emily picking up on some kind of presence tied to the house? Was she really seeing what she was drawing? These questions haunted me every waking moment. In the midst of this, a new piece of information surfaced that sent chills through me. A man named Harold, who had lived near the house when the woman disappeared, recently moved back into town. Harold had a reputation. He was known as a bit of a recluse, someone who'd had run-ins with the law, and his name had come up in police interviews years ago. Some said he had a temper. Others hinted he knew more about the woman's disappearance than he let on. I decided to reach out, hoping Harold might have some answers. But when I did, his reaction was cold and defensive, and he refused to talk. That silence spoke volumes. Was he hiding something? Was he involved in the cold case? Or was he just another dead end? Meanwhile, I started noticing strange things happening around our home. Doors left slightly ajar, items moved from their usual places, and a lingering feeling of being watched. One evening, I found a small, folded piece of paper slipped under our front door. It was blank except for a crude drawing of the same house Emily kept drawing. No signature, no message, just the drawing. That was the moment I realized this mystery was no longer confined to old reports or my daughter's imagination. It was becoming dangerously real. Through it all, I struggled to balance my search for the truth with the need to keep my family safe and sane. Emily deserved a normal childhood, Sarah deserved peace, and I just wanted to find answers without tearing everything apart. But as I learned, some answers come with a cost. People from our community started avoiding me. Old friends stopped returning calls, and whispers followed me wherever I went. It was as if the town itself wanted the past to stay buried forever. That resistance only made me more determined. Now, here's where it gets even more complicated. I discovered that the woman who disappeared wasn't just any missing person. She was connected to a powerful local family with deep roots in the town. The family's influence stretched into the police department, the media, and even the local government. That could explain the cold case's sudden silence and lack of progress. Could someone powerful have covered up the truth? And if so, what were they hiding? And how did my daughter's drawings tie into all of this? I know you're probably wondering if I'm chasing ghosts or if this story has a logical explanation. Maybe the house is just a coincidence. Maybe Emily picked up some detail from a story overheard, or maybe people's memories are playing tricks on them. But as I'm telling you now, the evidence keeps piling up, and the shadows keep getting darker. I have more questions than answers, and the more I dig, the more danger I seem to invite, not just for me, but for my whole family. You might be thinking this sounds like a thriller or a crime drama, but it's real life. And the stakes are incredibly high. The house that Emily draws isn't just a place, it's a symbol of secrets, lies, and a past that refuses to die. The cold case isn't just cold, it's frozen by fear, by silence, and by people who want to keep the truth locked away. And yet, somehow, a 6-year-old girl's drawings have cracked that icy surface, threatening to expose what's been hidden for decades. So, as we move forward in this story, keep an open mind. Watch for the details, the people who act strange, the stories that don't quite add up, and the whispers that seem to come from nowhere. Because in mysteries like this, the truth isn't always what it seems. Sometimes, the real story hides in the spaces between the facts, in the silences, in the shadows where no one dares to look. And if you've ever been fascinated by true crime, cold cases, or stories of family secrets unraveling, then you're in the right place. This story has all those elements and more, a mix of mystery, suspense, and the deep emotional pull of a parent trying to protect their child while chasing a truth that might be more terrifying than any fiction. The deeper I plunged into this mystery, the more I realized that the truth was being deliberately hidden. It wasn't just the weight of time or faded memories working against me. Someone or something was actively trying to stop me from finding out what happened all those years ago. It started with small things, almost easy to dismiss. My phone battery dying in the middle of important calls, emails disappearing without explanation, and a strange car that seemed to be parked outside our house at odd hours, always gone before I could get a good look. But then, things took a darker turn that made it impossible to ignore. One evening, I went to my office to find the folder containing all the documents, photos, and notes I had painstakingly gathered on the cold case completely gone. It wasn't misplaced or accidentally thrown out. It was vanished, as if someone had deliberately swept through, erased all traces of the evidence I'd collected. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a personal obsession. I had stumbled into something that some people desperately wanted to keep buried. Around the same time, I received a message that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't a phone call or an email, but a simple note slipped under our front door in the dead of night. No signature, just a few typed words on a scrap of paper. Stop digging or you'll regret it. The handwriting was neat, cold, and unmistakably deliberate. I showed it to Sarah, hoping she might convince me to give up the investigation, but instead, she looked torn, her eyes clouded with something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Guilt? What was she hiding? The tension between us grew, silent but suffocating, and every day I wondered if the woman I married was part of this web of secrets or just another victim of the past's long shadow. Then came the hardest betrayal of all, from someone I thought I could trust. Mike, my longtime friend and neighbor, suddenly became distant, refusing to answer my calls and avoiding any mention of the house or the cold case. I confronted him one afternoon, and under the weight of my questions, he finally cracked just enough to confess that he had once known the missing woman. But it wasn't just an acquaintance. It was a secret he had buried deep. He told me they'd been involved briefly years ago, and that he had been warned by others not to get involved again because the people behind the case were dangerous and had powerful connections. His warning wasn't just a suggestion. It felt like a plea to stay silent. I wanted to believe him, but now I was faced with a truth that was more complicated and tangled than I ever imagined. How much did Mike know? Had he lied to protect himself or someone else? And could I trust him when the stakes were this high? Just when I thought I could catch a break, a new piece of the puzzle surfaced, a secret from my own past that suddenly seemed tied to everything. While going through some old family documents, I found a letter addressed to my father, written the same year the woman disappeared. The letter was cryptic, hinting at an unnamed betrayal and a hidden relationship between my family and the missing woman's family. It raised more questions than it answered. Had my family been involved in covering up what happened? Was this cold case not just about a missing woman, but about a long-buried family secret I never knew existed? Suddenly, the lines between friend and foe, past and present, truth and lies began to blur. I was no longer just a curious parent trying to protect their daughter. I was in the middle of a dangerous story that could shake the foundation of everything I believed. And through it all, Emily kept drawing that same house, her latest pictures growing darker and more detailed. One night, she told me she heard someone calling her name from inside the house, and that she wanted to go there, to find the lady who was waiting. I felt my heart break with a mixture of fear and resolve. I knew that the answers and the danger were tied to that place. I just didn't know if we would come out of it safe. The last drawing she gave me was the most chilling yet. The house surrounded by thick, black shadows and a figure standing just beyond the front door, reaching out. Right now, I'm left standing at the edge of a mystery that's bigger and darker than I ever expected. Someone is watching, someone is warning me to stop, and secrets from the past refuse to stay hidden. But I can't turn back, not when my daughter's safety and the truth of a lost life hang in the balance. What happens next could change everything. Will I find the answers we need, or will the shadows finally close in? If you think you've seen mysteries before, wait until you hear what's coming next. Just as I thought I might be handling the pressure, life threw me a curveball I never saw coming, one that spun this whole story in a new, darker direction. My sister, Jessica, who lives a few states away, called me out of the blue, her voice shaking like she'd seen a ghost. She said she'd received a package in the mail. No return address, no explanation, just a small, battered notebook that looked decades old. When she opened it, inside were drawings. Drawings of the same house that Emily kept sketching, but with notes scrawled in the margins, words like watch, leave, and remember. Jessica said the notebook wasn't hers, but she found it tucked between some old family belongings that had been passed down from our parents. It was like this mystery was bleeding through our family, twisting in ways none of us could have predicted. Suddenly, this wasn't just about my daughter or the missing woman anymore. It was about my whole family's history and secrets someone was desperate to keep hidden. Meanwhile, I kept revisiting every piece of evidence I had collected, and the more I studied, the more contradictions I found. Some witnesses who had once firmly placed Harold near the house at the time of the disappearance now insisted they couldn't remember anything, or worse, said Harold was nowhere near the area. Others swore they saw a different man, someone none of the old police reports ever mentioned. Then there was a strange discovery in the archives, a police sketch of a suspect that didn't match Harold or any known person connected to the case. The sketch was crudely done but hauntingly familiar. The more I looked at it, the more I realized it resembled Mike. The same Mike who warned me to stop digging, who suddenly had a secret past with the missing woman. How could this be? Was Mike really involved? Or was someone trying to throw me off his trail? Adding to the chaos, Sarah's behavior grew more erratic. She started avoiding me altogether, spending late nights out, and refusing to talk about anything related to the case. Once, I found her crying quietly in the backyard, clutching an old photograph of the missing woman, one that I hadn't seen before. When I asked her where she got it, she froze, then told me she'd found it in a drawer she never opened. But why keep such a photo hidden? Was Sarah hiding her own connection to this mystery? Or was she protecting someone? The questions piled up, and every answer seemed to breed more suspicion. I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about my wife, my family, and the people I trusted. To make matters worse, the warnings escalated. Jessica got one too, a chilling voicemail left on her phone, just heavy breathing and a whisper, "Stop before it's too late." She deleted the message out of fear but called me immediately afterward. Now, with threats reaching across states and family members pulled deeper into this twisted web, I knew we were dealing with more than just a cold case. We were up against something organized, something ruthless. Whoever was behind this wanted silence, and they had no qualms about using fear to keep it. All of this chaos was making it nearly impossible to focus on the one thing that started it all, Emily's drawings. But they kept evolving. She began including strange symbols and numbers around the house in her sketches, details that didn't match the house in the photos or reports. I had no idea what they meant, but my gut told me they were clues. When I tried to ask Emily about them, she just said, "They're part of the story, Daddy. You have to find the rest." It was like she was guiding me from a place I couldn't see yet, pushing me to keep searching even as everything around me threatened to collapse. Every new discovery only raised more questions. Who sent those notebooks to Jessica? Why did the new evidence contradict what the police believed for decades? Could Mike be hiding darker secrets, or was he being framed to distract me? And what was Sarah's role in all of this? I couldn't trust anyone completely anymore, not even myself. The line between ally and enemy blurred with every passing day, and I was left wondering if the answers I sought would ever bring peace, or just more danger. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I received a message that froze me to my core, an email with no sender, no subject, only one sentence in the body. The house remembers. So do we. Attached was a photo of Emily's most recent drawing, but this time the shadowy figure in the window had a face I recognized but couldn't place. It was a face that haunted my dreams, a face connected to a secret I hadn't even dared to uncover. The mystery wasn't just alive, it was watching me. And now it was personal. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, one of those gloomy, overcast days where the sky just sits heavy and colorless over everything. I was driving back from the county records office, where I'd spent hours trying to get access to old building permits and land deeds related to the house in Emily's drawings. I'd finally gotten my hands on something promising, a scanned blueprint from the 1970s that showed a hidden root cellar beneath the property, something never mentioned in any official case report. I remember gripping the papers so tightly my knuckles turned white, heart pounding with the feeling that I was getting closer to something real, something buried deep. But as I pulled into our driveway, everything shifted. My front door was wide open. Not just unlocked, wide open, swinging slightly, like someone had walked in without hesitation and didn't bother hiding it. That hollow silence that hit me next, that was the moment I realized we weren't just being warned anymore. We were being hunted. I rushed inside, shouting for Sarah and Emily, but the house was empty. Everything looked like it had been left in a hurry. Sarah's purse still on the table, Emily's favorite stuffed bear lying on the floor next to the couch. I ran from room to room, checking windows, closets, the garage, but it was all the same, still undisturbed but wrong. On the kitchen counter sat a single Polaroid photo, aged and curling at the corners. It showed the house from Emily's drawings, but this time the image was real, an actual photo of the building in its current state, rundown and covered in ivy. Scrawled in red ink across the bottom was a message that made my blood run cold. You're not supposed to see what's underneath. My hands trembled as I read it again and again, trying to make sense of what it meant. And then I realized Sarah and Emily weren't missing. They were taken. Panic is a strange thing. It doesn't hit you all at once. It creeps in, quiet and slow, like a fog that clouds your thinking, until suddenly you can't breathe, and your chest feels like it's caving in. I called Sarah's phone, no answer. Emily's smartwatch? Offline. I called the police, trying to stay calm, trying to sound like a man not losing control. I told them everything I could without sounding like a lunatic. The open door. The missing family. The threatening message. But even as I spoke, I knew how it sounded, like a husband losing it over a cold case from decades ago. They promised to send someone to check it out, but I could hear the doubt in the dispatcher's voice. I wasn't a priority. I was a guy chasing ghosts. That night was the longest of my life. I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, the lights dimmed, holding that photo in my hand, listening for any sound that might tell me they were still close. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of wind against the window felt like someone watching, someone circling just beyond my reach. I kept thinking about Emily's last drawing, the one with the symbols and numbers, and wondered if it was a message I hadn't cracked yet. Were they clues? Coordinates? Was she trying to tell me where she was, or where to go? The questions circled in my mind like vultures. I was terrified of the answers. By morning, there was still no word, no calls, no updates. I went back through the security camera footage from the night before, but the files were wiped, just static from midnight to 3 a.m., the exact window when they must have disappeared. Someone knew how to erase their tracks. Someone had been watching. I was sure of it now. I started seeing the same black SUV pass by our house 3 times in one day, each time slowing down just slightly before continuing down the road. At first, I thought I was imagining things, paranoia creeping in after too many sleepless nights, but by the 3rd pass, I knew I wasn't alone in this anymore. They were keeping tabs. I wasn't just looking into the past now. I was part of the story, tangled in something that was still alive and dangerous. Desperate, I called Jessica, hoping to warn her, maybe even convince her to leave town for a while. But she didn't answer either. Her phone rang, and rang before cutting to voicemail. I left a message, voice shaking, telling her to call me back immediately, to get somewhere safe. I had no idea if she'd gotten another threat or if whoever was behind this was expanding their reach. The thought of losing my daughter, my wife, and now my sister, all because I wouldn't let go of this mystery, was unbearable. But it also made one thing clearer than ever. I couldn't stop now. If I did, I might never see them again. And if I gave up, whatever secrets that house held would never come to light. I went back to the blueprint I'd found at the county office, scanning it for any overlooked detail. The root cellar, it had to be the key. The cold case never mentioned it. None of the crime scene photos showed an entrance. It was like it didn't exist, like it had been deliberately erased. I thought about what the note said. You're not supposed to see what's underneath. Underneath. Was there something buried there? Evidence? A body? A truth someone killed to keep hidden? The more I thought about it, the more I knew I had to go back to the house. Not just to look, but to go inside, to find the cellar, and see for myself what someone was willing to destroy families to protect. But here's the thing. Before I could even pack a bag or figure out how to break into an abandoned property without raising flags, I got a text. No name, no number, just an anonymous message with a photo attached. It was blurry but unmistakable. Emily, sitting in a room I didn't recognize. She looked unharmed, but her face was pale, her eyes wide with confusion. She was holding a crumpled piece of paper, and through the blur, I could barely make out a few lines scribbled in her handwriting. It read, "It's not just her. There's more." That was it. Nothing else. Just those words and a timestamp that told me the photo had been taken only hours ago. My heart cracked wide open. Not just because my daughter was somewhere out there, alive but not with me, but because the message confirmed my worst fear. This wasn't just about the woman who went missing all those years ago. There were more. More people. More victims. More truths hidden beneath that house and behind the faces of people I thought I could trust. The mystery was no longer just unsolved. It was still unfolding. And now it was personal. So I ask you, if you were in my place, if your family was taken, your past rewritten, and your future dangling by a thread, what would you do? Because I have no choice now. I have to follow the trail. I have to find that house, find that cellar, and finally see what someone has gone to deadly lengths to hide. But I have a feeling what I find beneath that house will be far worse than I ever imagined. I drove for hours without stopping, eyes glued to the road, hands clenching the wheel so tightly my fingers began to cramp. I had made up my mind. I was going back to the house. I didn't care if it was boarded up, patrolled, condemned by the county, or crawling with whatever threat had taken my family. Emily's face in that photo haunted me, and that one scribbled line, "It's not just her. There's more." I couldn't let that go. It wasn't just a clue, it was a warning. Whatever was hidden in that house was bigger than one missing woman or one decades-old cold case. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was that I was already walking straight into the trap. Because just before I reached the outskirts of town, just when the house came into view through the thinning trees and overgrown brush, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a name I hadn't seen in years. My mother. She died 10 years ago. I froze. Pulled over. My heart thudded against my ribs. I stared at the screen like it would blink away. But the message stayed. One line. Just 5 words. Don't trust what you know. I almost dropped the phone. A trick? A glitch? Someone using her number somehow? I didn't know. I didn't care. I called it. Straight to voicemail. No name, no greeting, just static that sounded too long, like someone had pressed the phone up against something they didn't want me to hear clearly. A rustling sound. Maybe breathing. Then it cut off. I sat there, parked in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees and wind, and for the first time in this entire ordeal, I felt something deeper than fear. I felt disoriented. Like my mind had been twisted sideways and the foundation of everything I'd believed was cracking beneath my feet. I made it to the house just before dusk. It looked even worse than the photos. Weather-worn wood, vines curling up its sides like claws, and the porch sagging so low I was sure it would collapse if I stepped wrong. But something was different. The front door was ajar, just like my house the day Sarah and Emily disappeared. It wasn't broken into. It was waiting. I pushed it open and stepped inside, every nerve screaming that this was a mistake, but some deeper instinct pulling me forward. The floor groaned under my weight, and dust filled the air with each step. I followed the blueprint in my mind until I reached the back hallway, where the root cellar entrance should be. It was there, hidden behind an old shelf that looked like it hadn't been moved in decades. I pulled it aside, revealing a narrow hatch with rusted metal latches and old padlocks, already broken. Someone had been here. Maybe still was. I descended into the darkness, each step colder than the last. My flashlight barely cut through the stale air. The cellar was bigger than I expected, carved out unevenly with stone walls and rotted beams. And then, at the far end, something caught the light. A wall covered in photos, newspaper clippings, and documents, like some sort of underground archive. Most were old, decades old, but some were recent. Too recent. One was of me, taken just a few days ago, outside my house. And next to it, Sarah,
Mike,
Jessica, even Emily. Labeled, tagged, watched. There was a pattern. Notes linking people. Arrows connecting timelines. Names I didn't recognize, and then one I did. Sarah Langford, not my wife. Not as far as I knew. But a different Sarah Langford, from a case file dating back 23 years. She had changed her name. Disappeared. And the most damning thing? A police report from another state. Suspect in witness tampering, obstruction, and disappearance of a minor. The photo looked exactly like my wife. I couldn't breathe. My mind reeled. Sarah? My Sarah?
No.
It had to be someone else. A mistake. I yanked the file off the wall and flipped through the documents. Names, places, statements, all connecting her to the original cold case. She knew the missing woman. They were sisters. That missing woman, the one I had spent weeks obsessing over, was Emily's aunt. And Sarah had never said a word. Not once. All these years. It wasn't just a cold case to her. It was personal. Family. And now I finally understood why she avoided my questions, why she kept trying to redirect my focus. She didn't want me to find the truth, because she was already neck-deep in it. But that's not the worst part. The last folder on the wall, it held one photo. A group photo from a town meeting decades ago. Standing among a crowd of people, right in the center, was my father. Younger, sharper, arm around the same woman who vanished all those years ago. The caption underneath said it all. Town Planning Committee, June 1998, Jonathan Ward and Teresa Langford. My father. Her aunt. And suddenly, everything fractured. My family had been part of this story from the beginning, and I had no idea. Now, I don't know who to believe. I don't know who to trust. I don't even know what I'm part of. But I do know one thing. Emily knew all along. Those drawings weren't just clues. They were memories. Not hers. Someone else's. Someone speaking through her. And now that I've opened this door, I don't think any of us are safe anymore. Because if Sarah lied about who she is, what else has she kept hidden? And why is everyone connected to this house either missing or dead? I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The silence in the house wrapped around me like a noose, tightening every time I tried to shut my eyes. Every corner, every creak, every flicker of shadow felt like it was watching me. I kept going over the evidence I'd pulled from the cellar, the documents, the photos, the names. My father,
Sarah.
Emily, all woven together in a way that didn't make sense unless I was willing to accept one unbearable truth, that the people I loved most weren't who I thought they were. And that maybe, just maybe, I never really knew them at all. Around 3 a.m., I picked up my phone and called Jessica, my wife's sister. She hadn't answered my last 3 texts, and now I knew why. Her number had been listed in one of the old files, buried under a tab labeled secondary watch list. She wasn't just involved. She'd been followed,
Tracked.
possibly threatened. She picked up after the 3rd ring, her voice thick with sleep, but immediately shifting to panic when I told her what I'd found. But not shock. That's what hit me the hardest. She wasn't shocked. She knew. She knew Sarah wasn't who she claimed to be, knew about the house, about the missing woman, maybe even about my father. And when I confronted her, when I asked how long she'd been keeping this from me, there was a long pause. Then she said, "I tried to protect you, but now it's too late." That's when the ultimatum came. She begged me to burn the files. All of them. She said there were people watching, people who would stop at nothing to keep the truth buried. And then she said something that knocked the breath out of me. "If you want Emily back, you'll have to play their game." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the wall in front of me, trying to process what that even meant. What game? Who were they? And most importantly, was Jessica threatening me or trying to save me? Before I could respond, the call ended. No click, no goodbye, just dead silence. I called back, straight to voicemail. And that's when I saw the headlights outside my house. A black SUV, parked at the edge of my driveway, engine running, but no one stepping out. Just sitting there, watching. I turned off the lights and backed away from the window, heart racing, mind spinning. I knew I had a choice to make. I could walk away, destroy the files, pretend none of this ever happened, hope Sarah and Emily turned up on their own. Or I could lean in, dig deeper, risk everything. But I'd be doing it alone, because everyone around me was compromised. At sunrise, I made another call, to someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. Lucas Green, a former investigative journalist turned reclusive conspiracy theorist after his brother vanished under suspicious circumstances. He was labeled a crackpot online now, but I remembered how he used to chase stories nobody else would touch. He answered on the 2nd ring, his voice laced with suspicion until I mentioned the house and the Langford case. Then everything changed. He asked where I was. I told him. He said he'd be there in 2 hours, and that if anyone else showed up before him, I should run. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just personal. It was systemic. Bigger than me. Bigger than Sarah. And that maybe the only way out was through. But before Lucas arrived, I had one last thing to do. I had to confront my father. The man I grew up idolizing. The man who taught me how to ride a bike, to tie a tie, to be a father. The man whose name and photo I had just found linked to a woman who vanished without a trace. I drove to the assisted living facility, where he'd been staying since his stroke last year. He barely spoke anymore, just stared out the window most days, lost in the fog of whatever was left of his memories. But when I pulled out the photo and placed it in front of him, something shifted. His eyes focused. His hands trembled. And for the first time in months, he spoke a full sentence. We were supposed to keep it quiet. My blood ran cold. I asked him what he meant, who we was, what happened to Teresa Langford. He shook his head, over and over, then said, "They're watching. They always watch." That was it. That's all he gave me. A cryptic half-confession that only deepened the pit in my stomach. And I realized I was truly alone now. Everyone who could give me real answers was either too scared, too broken, or too far gone. And now I had a new, impossible decision to make. Confront Sarah, wherever she was hiding, or wait for Lucas, and risk losing my last chance to catch her off guard. Because deep down, no matter how much I wanted to believe she was a victim, part of me knew she was playing both sides. Maybe she loved me. Maybe she didn't. But one thing was clear, she knew where Emily was. And whatever game she was playing, I was finally ready to play back. But just before I left the facility, my phone buzzed again. A new text. No number. No name. Just one word. Stop. And this time, there was a photo attached, taken just seconds ago. It was me, standing outside my father's window. Whoever sent, it wasn't just watching. They were here, right now. And I wasn't sure I could escape this time. The moment I saw that photo, me outside the window, clearly unaware I was being watched, something in me snapped. All illusions of control, of time, of safety, disappeared in an instant. This wasn't a string of bad coincidences or personal secrets unraveling. This was surveillance. Intentional, precise, and deeply coordinated. Someone didn't just want to scare me. They wanted to remind me I was never in control. That every move I'd made, every page I'd turned, every person I'd trusted, had been under a microscope. And now I had to face a truth that felt almost too big to comprehend. This wasn't about Sarah. It wasn't even just about Emily. It was about everyone. And I was just a loose thread in a tapestry too massive to see all at once. When Lucas arrived, I practically dragged him into the garage, locking the door behind us and showing him everything: files, the photo, my father's words, and the black SUV that was now gone but had left tire tracks across my driveway. He listened carefully, but I could see it in his eyes. This wasn't news to him. He'd known about something like this for years. But even he looked rattled when I showed him the final document I found tucked into the lining of Sarah's old suitcase, a list of names. Mine, my father's, Jessica's, and at least 12 others I didn't recognize. Each one labeled with a status: embedded, compromise, watching, unknown. When he saw one of the names, Maria Simmons, he paled. That was the woman he claimed vanished. His brother's girlfriend. Supposedly just a tragic, cold case. But she was on the list. Next to her name was a single word: terminated. We started calling the others, people we knew, people we didn't. Some numbers were disconnected. Some rang endlessly. 2 answered. One hung up the second I said my name. The other? A man named Harold, said he'd been waiting for this call for 22 years. That's when it all cracked open. Harold explained that in the late 90s, a group of researchers working on behavioral analysis had been subcontracted by a private firm, funded by a quiet branch of government that didn't officially exist. They were building psychological profiles on families. Not terrorists. Not foreign operatives. Regular American families. Based on patterns, genetics, choices, emotional tendencies. They were trying to predict who might become unstable, dangerous, or uncontrollable. And then they'd act. Not to eliminate, but to replace. Embedded wasn't just a status. It was a label for substitutes. Trained individuals who assumed the identities of real people, husbands, wives, even children. Harold said he'd managed to escape when he realized what was happening. But his brother hadn't. He was taken in 2003. And the woman he thought was his sister-in-law? She wasn't real. Just like Sarah might not be. Just like Emily might never have been ours. Lucas and I sat in the garage, processing all of this, when a voice came from the baby monitor in the corner, the one I hadn't touched in weeks. Static, then words. "You're not supposed to be here." I grabbed it, shouted into the receiver, but all I heard was breathing. And then one final sentence: "They know where you're going next." Before I could even think, I got a text from Jessica. "I'm sorry. I told them everything. I didn't have a choice. Run." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Jessica, who I thought was helping, had flipped. Whether she'd been turned, threatened, or was always part of it, I didn't know. But her betrayal hit hard, because she'd been part of our lives since the beginning. She held Emily the day we brought her home from the hospital. She stayed with Sarah through every panic attack. She once told me she'd never lie to me. And now, she'd just handed me over. Lucas wanted to leave, to disappear. "We go off-grid now," he said. "We'll take what we know, build a network, expose them piece by piece." But I couldn't. I wasn't going to run. Not without knowing if Emily was real. If Sarah was alive. If the life I'd built had meant anything at all. I had to know what was behind this, who was pulling the strings, and why me. That's when Lucas pulled a final trick out of his sleeve. A location, deep in the woods, several hours north. An old compound. No phone signal, no cameras. That's where it all started, he said. If your wife is still who you think she is, she'll be there. And then he handed me a flash drive. Every answer you've been looking for is on this. But once you watch it, there's no going back. Just before we left, I looked out into the backyard. In the farthest corner, by the treehouse Emily used to play in, was a small shape, a red-haired girl, standing motionless, staring at the house. My heart leapt. "Emily," I shouted. But by the time I got to the treehouse, she was gone. All that remained was a plastic bracelet, the kind she used to wear at school. Only this one was marked with a number. Just a number. 0472B. And suddenly I realized I wasn't just trying to save my family anymore. I was trying to untangle a program that had rewritten lives across the country, and I might have been part of it from the very beginning. The sky was burning orange by the time I reached the weathered farmhouse at the edge of the forest. The one from my dreams, the one I swore I had never seen before, yet could describe in intimate detail. My heart pounded as I stepped out of the car, gravel crunching beneath my boots. The woods around it were silent, heavy, the kind of stillness that warns you something is waiting to happen. I'd driven across 3 states, chasing whispers, encrypted messages, and a photo I still couldn't explain. My daughter in the woods, my face lurking in the trees behind her. I had to know if I was going insane, or if the truth was bigger than anything I'd been willing to accept. And when I opened the creaking front door and stepped into the musty, dust-layered darkness, I finally got my answer. The walls were lined with photographs, thousands of them. All of me. Me laughing. Me asleep. Me at my wedding. Me holding my daughter for the first time. Some taken from across the street, others clearly from inside my home. Angles that should have been impossible unless someone had been there. Watching. Living alongside me. I staggered back as a wave of nausea rolled over me. On the far wall was a map, red strings stretching from city to city, names scribbled in black ink beneath each one. Mine was at the center, circled multiple times. But around it were others, Sarah's, Lucas's, even Emily's. And scrawled across the top of the map, in a handwriting that stopped my breath, was a single phrase, asterisk, every subject forgets. Eventually, asterisk. I turned slowly and there he was. Not a double. Not an agent. Not a hallucination. It was my brother, Mason. The same brother who'd gone missing when we were kids. The one my parents never talked about, who I'd convinced myself had run away. He looked older, worn, eyes hollowed by time and madness, but unmistakably him. He smiled, something twisted and sharp curling on his lips. "They lied to both of us," he said. "But they gave me a choice. I took it." As he spoke, the room's lights flickered and pulsed. Mason explained everything. The research facility buried beneath this house. The experiments done on memory, identity, perception. We'd both been test subjects as children. One remembered. One didn't. And when the program was dismantled years ago, I was reinserted into a normal life while Mason stayed behind, working from the shadows, perfecting the system. He showed me files with my name marked primary host. Every memory I'd had was real, but they weren't mine. They were given to me by a dead man. The real me had died years ago during a field test gone wrong. I wasn't a duplicate. I was the continuation. The living software stitched into flesh and bone, a vessel powered by data. My knees buckled. I wanted to scream, cry, run, but Mason wasn't finished. "You want to know why Emily draws things that haven't happened yet? Why she knew where to find you in the forest that night?" He stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "Because she's the next version. Version 2. The only one born, not built." He lunged at me before I could react, knocking over a table as we crashed to the ground. We grappled in the dark, years of rage and betrayal boiling over. I smashed a lamp across his back. He drove a screwdriver into my shoulder. Blood spilled, hot and slick. I saw flashes, memories, data, someone else's pain coursing through me. Mason tried to inject me with something from a metal syringe, whispering about rebooting my memory cycle. I slammed his hand against the wall and turned the needle on him. He laughed, even as it pierced his neck, choking out the words, "It won't change anything. They're already watching." When he collapsed, twitching on the floor, I staggered to my feet and grabbed his laptop. My hands trembled as I opened the last file, a video feed. It was a live stream of my home. Emily was asleep in bed, and standing in the corner of her room, just out of focus, was me. Again. Or someone wearing my face. Watching. Still. The feed cut to static. Sirens wailed in the distance. The farmhouse began to shake. As I limped out into the night, bleeding and broken, I looked back one last time at the building that held every answer I'd spent my life chasing. It erupted in flames seconds later, swallowing years of secrets in a pillar of smoke and fire. But I knew better than to believe it was over. Because as I got back to my car, heart racing, shoulder burning, I found a note taped to the windshield. Just 6 words. Emily dreams in code. Protect her. And in the rearview mirror, I saw headlights flicker on from deep within the woods. Not one car. 4. Waiting. Watching. Still coming. 3 months later, I found myself standing alone in a cabin tucked deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains, far beyond the reach of cell towers, surveillance satellites, or search algorithms. The wind outside had that gentle, mournful hum that always made me think of lullabies, sad ones, like the kind you sing not to soothe, but to mourn. Emily was asleep in the next room, her chest rising and falling in a slow, peaceful rhythm I checked far too often, just to reassure myself that she was real, still here, still untouched by whatever digital chaos had created and nearly destroyed both of us. Every night before she drifts off, she asks me the same question. Dad, when will they stop watching us? And every night I give her the same answer. As long as we remember who we are, they can't win. The truth is, I'm not sure what I am anymore. Not in the way that matters. But I know what I'm not. I'm not a puppet. I'm not a vessel for someone else's plan, and I'm no longer running from the shadow of who I was programmed to be. After that night at the farmhouse, after Mason died, after I burned everything he built, I didn't go to the police. There was no evidence left to show them, nothing they'd understand even if I could explain. Because how do you explain a life that was manufactured? How do you tell someone that your entire memory, your personality, your soul, was designed as part of a government prototype that got buried when the wrong people disappeared? You can't. You survive instead. You move underground. You change names. You erase yourself from every database and camera feed you can find. I became a ghost in a world that once claimed to know me better than I knew myself. But ghosts can still love. They can still fight. They can still protect what matters. Emily doesn't draw strange houses anymore. She paints animals now, deer, foxes, wild birds that seem to always come to our porch just after she finishes a picture. I think she's healing in ways I don't understand yet. Maybe she's not version 2. Maybe she's just a child, trying to make sense of a world that made her a target before she even had the language to defend herself. But sometimes, when the wind hits just right or a certain song plays on the old radio, I see her eyes darken with something deeper. A flicker of memory that doesn't belong to her. A whisper of something still watching through the cracks. I never ask about it. I've learned not everything needs to be uncovered. Some ghosts want to stay buried. But here's the part that still haunts me. A week ago, I received a package, no return address, just a thick envelope sealed with wax. Inside was a single USB drive. No note. No instructions. Against my better judgment, I loaded it onto an old laptop I'd kept isolated from the grid. The file was a video, timestamped 3 days into the future. It showed me sitting at this exact table, staring into the camera, whispering something over and over. I turned the volume up. My future self was repeating a phrase. Asterisk, she'll dream of the sky. Don't let her climb. Asterisk, and behind me, in the reflection of the cabin window, I saw figures standing among the trees, tall, still, watching. The screen went black. Then, a message appeared in white block text. Reprogramming initiated. Phase 3 confirmed. I destroyed the laptop that night. But the image burned into my brain. And I realized something. This was never about erasing the past. It was about hijacking the future. Emily isn't just the next version. She might be the last chance to break the cycle. Every time I think we're free, another layer peels back. Another hand reaches out from the dark. Maybe the system isn't dead. Maybe it never needed buildings or labs or wires. Maybe it's already inside those of us they touched. But I've made a choice now. I won't run anymore. I won't live in fear of algorithms or faceless men behind surveillance drones or strange dreams planted like viruses. I will raise Emily in truth. I will teach her that the things that make us human, our memories, our love, our pain, they're not code. They're connection. That's something no program, no matter how advanced, can replicate without losing control. So if you're watching this, if you found this story on your feed, if it popped up while you were searching for something else, maybe something harmless like family vlogs or strange unsolved cases, then ask yourself, why this story? Why now? Because maybe someone wants you to remember something you were made to forget. Maybe this isn't just my story. Maybe it's yours too. And if one day someone comes to your door claiming to know who you really are, look them in the eyes and ask one question. Asterisk, do I dream in code? 2. Asterisk. Then decide if you're ready for the answer.